Yo, swinging and banging all the way from the land of Canaan. We got James, the argument king, in the building. We chiefing on that lovely on the stream yard acting ugly. We back, man. Source gang, 7 gang over everything. You know how we rocking, man. And with no further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to my brother. He got a powerful, powerful presentation that he wants to give to the people today. So that's what we gonna do, man. My brother gonna rock. He gonna get that information out, and the haters gonna hate, man. And we gonna continue to graduate. So with no further ado, James, the argument king, is on you, my brother.
All right, man. I want to say shalom to everybody out there. You know, we want to give all praise and glory to the Most High, man. And I'm just gonna come out and say it like this, man. We have a lot of people out there talking a lot of noise about what we putting out, the information we sharing with y'all. But ain't none of that gonna stop us from putting that information out. And we know they scared to come over here on the source and challenge us face to face on the information. They want to try to drag us over to their platforms where they can try to shut off your mic and throw you in the background and stuff when you're making a point that's killing their argument. But we ain't gonna have that today. We about to start putting out this information that's gonna make them fall to their knees and bow down and respect what we got going on over here in Israel, man. I mean that. Let me share my screen. All right, you see it, Jashu?
It's up there.
All right, great. This presentation right here, I entitled, "Are the quote-unquote African Y haplogroups all really African?" You know what I'm saying? Because over the next 2 presentations I do, we're going to go into where some of these haplogroups originate at according to the new scholarship on the subject, and it ain't in Africa. But today, I'm really going to stick a dagger all up in the back of some of these Afrocentric community, because I'm going to show right here, right now, that haplogroup E is not indigenous to sub-Saharan Africa. So they're going to have to give up on all them arguments where they be trying to say, oh, well, we've been in Africa forever, like Garfield. We've been in Africa for 10,000 years, man. Get out of here with that pseudo shit. That's why y'all won't come over here to the source, man, because we're going to check y'all on all that pseudo-ness. We don't play that, man. So let's get into it. Of course, the introduction. In this presentation, we'll be analyzing the Y chromosome of the peoples called African populations, quote unquote. We will find that many of these groups did not find their origin in Africa, but in other regions of the world, while those are indigenous to Africa came from a different branch of the phylogenetic tree. We will separate the indigenous Africans from the more recent migrants to the continent and explore their origins, rounding it out with an exploration of their theoretical place among the Genesis table of nations found in Genesis 10. All right. As in the prior presentation, we'll be using the migration patterns of the people and of the world after the last glacial maximum, which our ancestors kept a cultural memory of this event by calling it the Great Flood of Noah. By exploring these migration patterns, we can better analyze and form a theory in which people belonging to which son, quote unquote, son of Noah, whether it's Ham, Shem, or Japheth, you know what I'm saying? So we can better narrow down the Y chromosome of the children of Israel, because that's really the main goal. We want to do our best to narrow down what is the most likely Y chromosome of the children of Israel, so we can follow the commission to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, because that's the great commission that we're supposed to be doing right now, fulfilling our duty and a big part of our calling. All right, if you see right here in this area right here, we've already done all this right here is Yapatha, Yah enlargeth, or Japheth's lineage, the CF lineage from here all the way over. But we're going to be dealing with the A and B lineages mainly up in here, and E's going to come up a bit up in here. So who are the peoples indigenous to Africa? The population structure of Africa prior to the expansion of food explorers, pastoralists, and agriculturalists remains unknown. So when you have all these people talking about, oh, we know for sure that we've been in Africa for this long and that long, blah, blah. No, they have no idea. They're just starting to go into these studies with this presentation, with the article that I'm going to be using in this presentation right here. because they don't know nothing about it before the food producers got there, where there was a more of an archaeological record left behind. Because hunters and gatherers, they move around a lot, so they don't leave much of an archaeological record. But when you have pastoralists and agriculturalists, they can start building communities, they can start building towns, villages, because they have more food to sustain a larger population, so they could be more in situ. All right. To reconstruct African population structure prior to the spread of food producers, we generate new genome-wide data from 15 ancient sub-Saharan Africans for 3 individuals from the Western Cape of South Africa from 2300 to 1300 years ago. We carried out direct shotgun sequence 0.7 to 2-fold coverage for 12 individuals from Eastern and Southern Central Africa. We used the in solution enriched of 1.2 million single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNPs. These include 4 individuals from the coastal region of Kenya and Tanzania 1400 to 400 years ago, one from the interior of Tanzania 3100 years ago, and 7 from Malawi ranging from 8100 to 2500 years ago. All right, we use principal component analysis to automate clustering to relate the 16 ancient individuals to present-day sub-Saharan African, as you can see over here in the figure. If you look over here in the A right here, by where it says A, you can see this area right here is present sub-Saharan Africans, and the only one you'll see there is Tanzania 600 BP, right down here. And that's the only one that's closest to sub-Saharan. The rest of them fall within a range going down. And we're going to find out from other articles why some of these fall into this range. Whereas 2 individuals from 2,000 years ago, hunter-gatherer contents in South Africa, share ancestry with Southern African Khoisan populations. In principal component analysis, 11 of the 12 ancient individuals who lived in Eastern and South Central Africa between 8100 and 400 years ago form a graduate and relatedness to the Eastern African Hazan on one hand and the Southern African Khoisan on the other hand. As we can see again in this figure, you can see them right here about in the middle. The genetic line correlates to geography, running along a north-south axis with ancient individuals from Ethiopia 4,500 years ago, Kenya 400 years ago, Tanzania 1,400 years ago, and Malawi 8,100 to 2,500 years ago, showing increased affinity to Southern Africans. Both ancient individuals and present-day Khoisan, the 7 individuals from Malawi, show no clear heterogeneity, indicating a long-standing and distinct population in ancient Malawi that persists for at least 5,000 years, the minimal span of our radiocarbon dates, but which no longer exists today. But they pretty much saying that the people they found Malawi, and this is in more towards Northeast Africa, because they've been trying to say the Khoisan been in South Africa for 200,000 years and all that, but the evidence we see more recently shows that actually their ancestors were more up into Northeast Africa. And we're going to find out more or less what kind of pushed them out the region as we go along here. All right, so if we look at some of these Y chromosomes, which you find right here, the Y chromosome right here, of the males in South Africa, you have A, just like you would have the Khoisan have today. So both of them are A from 2,000 years ago. But then you get to Malawi, you have haplogroup BT, which is more of a theoretical haplogroup. I've been doing some other studies, and a lot of times they end up changing that into either a branch of a basal B or a branch of A. But right here in this presentation, right here in this article, they still present it as BT. But that will fall along more towards the B cluster. And then at the very bottom in Kenya, 400 years ago, you get E1B1B, 1B2, which they say is Near Eastern ancestry. And we all know that E1B1B is our brother haplogroup. So wherever it would have originated or branched out from, our branch would be right there, because they would have branched off from our ancestral lineage before we did. And when you look at the females, a lot of them are L0, and then you have like L4, and most of them are either South African lineage or hunter and gatherer lineages, or I think one of them's a Near Eastern or East African lineage, East African sub-Saharan lineage. We find that ancestry related to the ancient South African was present much further north and east in the past than is apparently today, like I was just saying a second ago. This ancient South African ancestry comprised of up to 91% of the ancestry of the Khoisan today. And that's showed on table S5. I think I might have put in this presentation. And also 31%, give or take 3% of the ancestry of Tanzania, Zanzibar, 1,400 years ago, 60%, give or take 6% of the ancestry of Malawi, Fingira, 6,100 years ago, which pretty much saying all of these are mostly related to the Khoisan groups. Notably, the Khoisan-related ancestry in ancient individuals from Malawi and Tanzania is symmetrically related to the two previously identified lineages presented in the San, estimated to have diverged at least 20,000 years ago. So they're saying that's when they branched from each other, implying that this is an ancient divergent branch of the group that lived in East Africa at least until 1,400 years ago. So they were living up in East Africa to about 1,400 years ago. And we're going to see, like I said, what kind of pushed them out that region. However, it is not present in all East Africans, as we do not detect it in the 400-year-old individual from the coastal Kenya, nor in the present day Hadza people. Both supervised clustering and formal ancestry estimations suggest that individuals from the Hadaz group in Tanzania can be modeled as deriving all their ancestry from a lineage related deep to an ancient East African, such as Ethiopia 4,500 BP or years ago individual. However, this lineage appears to have contributed little ancestry to present-day Bantu speakers in East Africa, who instead trace their ancestry to a lineage related to present-day Western Africans, in addition to components related to Neolithic speaking Dinka and the Tanzania Luxmata 3,100 years ago pastoralists. So they pretty much saying that the Bantu speakers in East Africa come from a common ancestral population with us West Africans, and they're not descended from these same people that we find in the region. And we know they are E1B1A2. That's what they are in East Africa. And if you look at the images to the right, these are these A and B haplogroup peoples. We are not related to these people. They're from a completely different branch of the Y chromosome tree than us. From our studies, we would throw them along the branch of what they call, of our ancestors would have called Hamitic or Hamites. These people carry, like I said, A and B haplogroups. They're the first indigenous people to Africa after the last glacial maximum. And a lot of people would say that that's not correct. But towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to show an article that shows that that is true. They do come from the same region in that Asia area than most other peoples do. And they make a strong case to it. The Sandawi, another population like the Hadza, which is BT, uses click consonants in their spoken language, are modeled as having ancestry similar to Hadza, and also admixture related to that of the neighboring population, consistent with previous findings. I wanted to say something because it really just jumped out in my mind right now. Notice that when we deal with a lot of those CF lineages, they spoke an ancient Indo-European language, right? And then when you deal with a lot of these A and B lineages, they speak click languages. So our ancestors explained that by the splitting of the tongues in ancient Babylon, and that's why the people speak in those different languages, why other peoples at that time would have been speaking more of a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language branch of language. So I mean, I think even in their languages, is also coinciding with their DNA and with a lot of their cultural aspects to show that they do come from some familiar common ancestral population to carry all these traits. And back to the article, population replacement by incoming food producers appeared to have been nearly complete in Malawi, where we detect little, if any, ancestry from the ancient individuals that lived 8,100 to 2,500 years ago. Instead, present-day Malawian individuals are consistent with deriving all their ancestry from the Bantu expansion of ultimate West African origin. So what they're showing pretty much here is that it was actually the Bantu expansion that pushed these people out of their region that they were in, more North and East Africa. So we really not finding evidence of people living in South Africa. And those who are living below the Sahel in sub-Saharan Africa, from here, especially on the eastern side, they're showing that a lot of these people are A and B haplogroups who come from a common ancestor, which like I said, our ancestors call Ham. All right, moving on. And as you can see, I even included the people of Sudan, you know, some of the smallest people in the world. Well, we got Manute Bol right here. He's A0T from A haplogroup all the way into you dealing with some of the Biaka pygmies and stuff like that, just to show the diversity of height and just physiognomy of these people who fall within what we would call from our ancestors Hamites. This study, which multiplies by 16-fold the number of individuals with genome-wide ancient DNA data from sub-Saharan Africa, highlight the power of ancient African genomes to provide insights into prehistoric events that are difficult to discern based solely on analysis of present-day genomes. Because like a lot of this information gonna show, you can't judge the past by where people live today. Humans have been migrating since hundreds of thousands of years ago on the secular timeline. So how you gonna sit here and try to just pigeonhole a people into one individual area of the world while everybody else migrating like we was just that backwards of a people? We reveal the presence of hitherto unknown clan of geographically structured hunter-gatherer population stretching from Ethiopia to South Africa, which we show existed prior to the great population transformation that occurred in the last few thousand years in association with the spread of herders and farmers. We also document deeper structure in Western Africa, possibly predating the divergence of ancestors of Southern African hunter-gatherers from other population lineages. This goes into something I'm going to go more into in my next presentation. But they found a lineage that is even more ancient than the Khoisan's lineage in present-day West Africans or ourselves as a people. So when a lot of people start trying to argue that everyone descend from the Khoisan or they ancestors of everybody, that's why a lot of times I step in and say, nah, they found what they call ghost DNA in, or sometimes they'll call it basal West African DNA in us that diverged earlier than the Khoisan diverged. Let me get back to where it was. We finally provide case examples of how populations in Eastern and Southern Africa were transformed by spread of food producers and show how the progress gave rise to the interactions with the previously established hunters and gatherers, with the outcomes ranging from no detectable mixture in present-day populations to substantial mixture. Our documentation of a radically different landscape of human populations before and after the spread of food producers highlight the difficulty of reconstruction the African past based solely on analysis of present-day populations, and the importance of using ancient DNA to study deep African population history in an era in which technological improvements have now made this feasible. It is clear that ancient DNA studies with larger sample sizes and covering a broader chronological and geographical range have the potential to make major progress in improving our understanding of African prehistory. But like I'm saying, a lot of this these ancient bones they're finding, a lot of them ain't E1B1A or E1B1B until you start getting some migrations into the region. And this right here came from reconstructing prehistoric African population structure led by Pontus Snoglin, Department of Genetics, Harvard Medical School. And this right here is an image of it to the right, so you'll know it when you see it. Hey, Jashub, I want to know if it was anything, because I know you probably read this article. Is there anything that may have stood out to you in the article you may want to bring up? I'm going to talk about it more a little bit later, but I just want to give you the floor to any input.
No, man. You pretty much hitting all the points, man, and firing on all cylinders. Just to recapitulate what you said about what we find in the oldest DNA that we find in sub-Saharan Africa is in Cameroon, and it's A00 and B. So,
Yep.
like you said, man, these guys. What happens is the burden of proof is on these guys to show us there in ancient times during that same time period. We don't see us there. We don't see our ancestors there. We see A and B there, like you brought up, the Khoi people, the Bushmen, these early Nilotic people, pre-Kerma populations, they all dominated by A and B. So, like you said, where is the evidence for our people being in sub-Saharan Africa, 8,000, 10,000 years ago, like the clown Garfield Can't Read said. So you're doing an excellent job, brother.
All right, then let me move into the next part then. Before 5,000 years ago, most of sub-Saharan Africa was sparsely occupied by a collection of linguistically and culturally diverse hunter and gatherer populations. Within the past 5,000 years, the majority of hunter and gatherer populations in Africa have disappeared, either through assimilation into expanding agro-pastoral farmer and herder groups or by extinction. The remaining hunting gatherers include the forest pygmy populations of Central Africa, isolated click-speaking populations of Tanzania, and the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert region of South Africa. Even some of these groups, however, have been experiencing a transition to agricultural sustenance over the past 100 years, because, it's hard to be a hunter and gatherer in Africa when, people are occupying a lot of places that weren't there beforehand. You got these different government, all this colonialism took place where they was just giving smaller and smaller regions for them to move around in. So, but like it's saying, 5,000 years ago, man, it was hunters and gatherers running around in sub-Saharan Africa, like me and the brother Jashub was just saying. So, like
James,
he said, what's up?
I hate to interrupt you, but Ngozi agrees. He says it right there. EM2 came down and killed the hunter-gatherers off and brought farming.
Exactly. And that's what we trying to get more people to see. Like I said, we don't agree with Ngozi in totality. You know what I'm saying? But the facts are the facts, and we can agree on them, if nothing else. You know what I'm saying? And moving on to the population structure, it is unclear to what extent the ancestral African population was structured at the time of 00A migration by modern humans 60,000 years ago. Deep ancestral population structure within Africa would affect inference of divergence time among African and non-African populations, extend the admixture between expanding modern humans and Neanderthals, and the causes of divergence among the origin of modern humans, either through demographic growth, unique mutations affecting behavior, etc. By examining genomic data from 600 gathered populations from southern, central, and eastern Africa, like the Zhou and the Komani Bushmen, the Umbuti and the Biaka, Hadza, and the Sandawi, in conjunction with 21 other African populations, we characterize the structure and relationship between these populations. Frequentist population structure analysis demonstrate that the hunter-gatherer populations are highly differentiated both among themselves and compared with other African populations. Thus, they do not seem to derive from agriculturalist population and instead present geographically distinct populations isolated from other groups for thousands of years. So these people that was there 5,000 years ago, they're not related to the agriculturalist people, like we said. They hunt and gather population. However, all hunt and gather populations do share an ancestral cluster, which solves which at small K levels. A similar phenomenon was observed in the Tashkov at paper, Microsatellite Structural Analysis, and suggests that Central African pygmies, Southern Khoisan, and Tanzanian cliques share a common ancestry distinct from other African populations, either through a more recent common ancestor or through long distance migration. And again, that's why we say that these groups seem to be whom our ancestors call Ham. These are the first people to populate the Nile Valley, and the first ones to be even into the interiors of sub-Saharan Africa. And that's what the land which our ancestors said was given to Ham. So that's why we contribute it this way. And it's a good way to show even though it's mythology of our people, and a mythology don't mean it's full of lies, all right? Mythology means that more or less is an oral tradition of our people. There seems to be a biological basis of truth to it by where these peoples migrated to, and the evidence that's showing up in the archaeological record. Population divergence between the eastern and western pygmy populations were present by the Mbuti and Biaka, respectively, and estimated have occurred approximately 15,000 to 27,000 years ago. Our Y chromosome macrosatellite data from the highly divergent basal Khoisan A3B1-M51 clade found exclusively in southern Africa have a more recent common ancestor at 40,000 years ago. If the time to the most recent common ancestor with the Khoisan population, 40,000 years, then this is among the first genetic evidence that the Khoisans have continuously occupied southern Africa for at least the entire span of the Upper Paleolithic. This conclusion assumes that any past geographic movement of the Khoisan ancestral population would have spread the distribution of A3B1 lineages, and these lineages would survive in contemporary populations. So I do want to point out that they do highlight as well that there's an assumption being placed here, which is what is really placing them down there in Southern Africa for so long. We present a target analysis of African hunter-gatherer genomes, including genomic SNP array data for Tanzania, Hadza, Sandawe, and South African Khoimani Bushmen. We find that the 6 sub-Saharan hunter-gatherer populations share common ancestry distinct from the agriculturalists. Analysis of the LD and heterozygonicity suggests that hunter-gatherers, especially I read this already. No, I didn't. Let me get down to what I didn't go over in earlier. LD and FIS patterns support the I'm right here in this area hypothesis that all human populations originate from the southern Africa, although we caution that sampling in Africa remains sparse. Our sample size of Bushmen numbers are 47 individuals, and other highly variable populations may be discovered. Additionally, the interaction between the agro-pastoralist populations and hunter-gatherers over the past 5,000 years has marked and affected hunter-gatherer population in a variety of ways, including sex-based gene flow from agriculturalists in hunter-gatherer groups, which is pretty much saying that the men were coming in and taking the women. That's just a nice way of saying that the men were coming in, running these people out of their lands, running war with them and taking their women. And a lot of that was because you need the antibodies in order to deal with a lot of the diseases that may be foreign to you in that region. And the women, a lot of time through breastfeeding, pass these antibodies on to the children. And it also gives you some better beneficial traits for the region that you're in. And I mean, like I said, our ancestors believe that's what the Most High wanted them to do. And again, we find that there is a genetic and biological basis for doing these things that is beneficial to the population doing it. For example, those associated with market hunter-gatherer in a variety of ways, sex-based, gene flow from agricultural pastoralists into hunter-gatherer groups. Demic bottlenecks in the Hadas and Central Pygmies and possibly unique selection pressures were an example associated with infectious disease. Like again, they're trying to bring the genes necessary, the antibodies necessary into their gene pools to better cope with the area in which they're migrating into. And this right here is from hunter-gatherer genomic diversity suggests a southern African origin of modern humans. And this was by Brianne Henn, Department of Genetics, Stanford University, and it was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on March 29th, 2011. The article I read before this was after this article, but I just wanted to make a point out of it first, so I put it there. But it's a newer article, and it speaks on the West Africans or ourselves having a deeper branch than the South Africans do, which will make us the origin of modern humans. And now I'm going to go back into the article I was in beforehand, but I just wanted to present it here so y'all would know we were switching and I wouldn't just be flowing from article to article and leaving y'all lost. This right here is about the Near Eastern admixture into the indigenous peoples of East Africa, because I've already shown and proved that the indigenous peoples of East Sub-Saharan Africa were these A and B populations. And even in East Africa, they were these A and B populations that were indigenous to these regions. So let's get into it. Western Eurasian related ancestry is pervasive in Eastern Africa today. And the timing of this admixture has been estimated to about 3,000 years ago on average. We found that the 3100 BP individual Tanzania Laxmanda associated with a savanna pastoral Neolithic archaeological tradition could be modeled as having 38%, give or take 1%, of her ancestry related to nearly 10,000-year-old pre-pottery farmers of the Levant. And we can exclude source population related to early farming populations in Iran and Anatolia. These results could be explained by migration in Africa from descendants of pre-pottery Levantine farmers, and alternatively by a scenario in which both pre-pottery Levantine farmers and Tanzania Laxmanda 3100 descend from a common ancestral population that lived thousands of years earlier in Africa or the Near East. So let's get more into it. We fit the remaining approximately 2/3 of Tanzania Laxmanda 31 as most closely related to Ethiopia 4100 BP, or allowing for a three-way mixture, also for a source closely related to the Dinka. The Levantine related ancestry in this case is 39%, give or take 1%. While these findings show that a Levant Neolithic related population made a critical contribution to the ancestry of present-day East Africans, present-day Cushitic speakers such as the Somali cannot be fit simply as having Tanzania Laxmanda 3100 BP ancestry. The best fitting model for the Somali includes the 3100 BP ancestry, Dinka related ancestry, and 16%, give or take, Iranian Neolithic related ancestry. So we seeing a lot of Near Eastern ancestry coming into this region 3,100 years ago, and we know what comes along with that. So that
you heating up, bro. You heating up, brother.
Hey, add what you want to add, bro.
Brother, are you saying that the East Africans have a Iranian Neolithic component? Is that what this? So
and you know that's European.
Come on, man.
I'm just saying,
bro. This flips the paradigm on its head, because the paradigm has been fed for us for years in society by these pro-African conscious brothers is that we've been in Africa and that's all we are. Africa, 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 the continent of Africa. But what you're showing right now, that there's a Neolithic Iranian component and Levantine farmer component in these East Africans. Very powerful information, brother.
Hey, and you know what that marker is? The J marker, bro. The
Right.
ancient Iranian Neolithic, and they came down from Georgia and would have put them right there up in the land of Japheth. You know what I'm saying? And they go back to CF. J go back to CF. We know that. Come on, man. That's showing that this J marker, they trying so hard to make into, you know what I'm saying, the house of Israel, the house of Shem, just don't fit the model, bro. It just don't. And this is based on the record, in the archaeological record, facts that we can find. Anybody can go look this up and see this information, man. Yeah,
Talk to them.
Yeah, but this suggests that ancestors related to Iranian Neolithic appeared in East Africa after the early gene flow related to Levant Neolithic populations, a scenario that is made more plausible by the genetic evidence of admixture of Iranian Neolithic related ancestry throughout the Levant by the time of the Bronze Age and in ancient Egypt by the Iron Age. So check this, I want to make this point. So that J marker was already in the Levant by the Bronze Age. Before the Bronze, you don't get Abraham coming into the region to the Middle Bronze Age. So how the hell does the J marker descend from Abraham if it was already there? It don't even make sense. It don't add up, man. Y'all need to go ahead and push that off and get rid of that. Yeah. In ancient Egypt by the Iron Age. Moving on. In contrast to the Malawi and Zanzibar individuals, all three ancient South Africans show affinities to the ancestry predominant in present-day two speakers of the Southern Kalahari more than to the present-day Juhoan speakers of the Northern Kalahari. However, the 1,200 year ago sample from the Western Cape that is found in a pastoralist context has a specific similarity in clustering analysis to present-day Khoi speaking pastoralist populations such as the Nama. And like them, it has an affinity to three groups: Khoisan, Western Eurasians, and East Africans. This supports the hypothesis that a non-Bantu related population carried East African and Levantine ancestry to South Africa by at least 1,200 years ago, providing direct evidence for claim previously made by analysis of present-day populations, man. You can't make this stuff up, man. And I don't see why a lot of Afrocentric people are so against the simple facts. Why? Because I believe they've made this Afrocentricity into a religion, bro, with axioms that cannot be broken. And so when you show them that, hey, these people descend directly from the indigenous peoples that mostly populated Europe, you cannot, I would not call them an African people because of that descent. They want to act like, well, no, if you just own the continent, now you African. So you gonna tell me the Europeans in South Africa, now you gonna consider them African? Are you gonna consider these J markers, these R1B markers? Are you gonna consider all of them African? I mean, it's the biggest marker in Europe right now. So you gonna make that African now? Nah, they ain't gonna want to do that. But when it fits their narrative, then they want everything to be that. All right. We used our modeling framework to show that African pastoralist individual from the Western Cape consisted of an admixture of two streams of ancestry related to non-Southern African populations, with 40%, 0.3%, give or take 2.3% ancestry related to Tanzania Luxmata 3100 BP. And I'm going to show you the Y markers of these people. 54%, give or take 7%, when restricting analysis to sequence of post-mortem damage, and the remainder being related to South African 2,000 years ago hunter-gatherers. This supports the hypothesis that the Savannah pastoralist Neolithic agricultural tradition in East Africa is a plausible source for the spreading of herding to South Africa. Even the Juhoan San group, with the least genetic affinity to the East Africans, have 9, give or take 1% of their ancestry most closely related to Tanzania Luxmata 3100 BP, consistent with previous findings that the ancestry of all present-day Khoi, San, and Khoi were affected by agro-pastoralist migrations in the last 2 millennia. So again, 2,000 years ago, sub-Saharan Africa didn't look nothing like it's looking today, especially on the eastern side and in South Africa. And this right here came from ancient West Eurasian ancestry. This starting here is going to be Ancient West Eurasian Ancestry in Southern and Eastern Africa by Joseph Pickner. And it says the history of South Africa involved interaction between indigenous hunter-gatherers and a range of population that moved into the region. Here we use genome-wide genetic data to show that there are at least 2 admixture events in the history of Khoisan populations, South African hunter-gatherers, and pastoralists who speak non-Bantu languages with click consonants. One involved population related to Niger-Congo speaking African populations, and the other introduced ancestry most closely related to Western Eurasia, Europe, or Middle Eastern populations. We date the latter admixture event to 900 to 1800 years ago and show that it had the largest demographic impact in Khoisan populations to speak Khoi-Kwada languages. A similar signal of Western Eurasian ancestry is present throughout Eastern Africa. In particular, we also find evidence of 2 admixture events in the history of Kenyan, Tanzanian, and Ethiopian populations. The earlier of the involved populations related to Western Eurasians, and which dated to 2700 to 3300 years ago. We construct the allele frequencies of the punitive Western Eurasian populations in East Africa and show that this population is a good proxy for the Western Eurasian ancestry in South Africa. The most parsimonious explanation for these findings is that Western Eurasian ancestry into South Africa directly through Eastern Africa. So again, this agriculture was not spontaneously just popped up in sub-Saharan Africa like a lot of them tried to argue. Like it just spontaneously popped up out of nowhere. No, there were people from the Near East that brought this down into the region. Hunt and gather populations have inhabited southern Africa for tens of thousands of years. With approximately the last 2,000 years, these populations were joined by food-producing groups, both pastoralists and agriculturalists. And a culturally diverse set of populations occupy the regions today. Because written history is unavailable until recently in Southern Africa, inferences about migration patterns leading to the present-day distribution of populations have largely been informed by archaeology and linguistics. Genetic data are an additional source of information about population history. Again, and I want to emphasize a point right here. Notice what they're doing. They're doing interdisciplinary studies. They're saying we need to add the archaeology with the linguistics and then use an extra supporting source in the genetic data. And that's a lot of what we like to do here. We like to use interdisciplinary stuff. We like to bring the history, the archaeology, any writings we can find, oral traditions we can find from the people. Like I mentioned again about how a lot of these people, especially in ancient times who descend from CF, speak Indo-European. These AB speak click languages, and the DE that was in that region would have spoke more of a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. But extracting this information remains challenging. Studies of diversity in South Africa have highlighted the influence of pre-colonial population admixture on the genetic structure of populations in the region, but have come to different conclusions about the historical scenarios that led to the admixture. In particular, although there is agreement about the arrival of Bantu-speaking agriculturalist populations had a major demographic impact in many populations, the importance of population movements from other parts of Africa or the world is unclear. Slubush argued for East African ancestry, specifically in the Nama, a pastoralist population, while Pickrell raised this possibility not just for the Nama, but for several Khoi-speaking populations, identifying the sources of non-Khoi ancestry in South Africa could shed light on the historical processes that led to the extensive linguistic and cultural diversity of the region. Here we develop techniques based on the extent of linkage disequilibrium to thoroughly examine the signal of admixture in South African Khoisan, defined here as indigenous populations speaking non-Bantu languages with click consonants without implying cultural, linguistic, or genetic homogeneity of Khoisan groups. First, we show that all Khoisan populations have some non-zero proportion of West Eurasian ancestry. Throughout this paper, we will use geographic labels to refer to ancestry, with the caveat that the geographic labels are derived from modern populations. That is, when we refer to Western Eurasian ancestry in South Africa, we are using this as a shorthand for the more cumbersome or more accurate phrasing of ancestry most closely related to populations currently living in Western Eurasia, in populations currently living in South Africa. So y'all can just understand what they mean, because I don't like to leave y'all guessing too much. I want to make sure I added that point so y'all know exactly what the article said. Second, we show that there are multiple waves of population mixture in the history of many Southern and Eastern African populations, and that Western Eurasian ancestry entered East Africa on average 2,700 to 3,300 years ago, and Southern Africa 900 to 1,800 years ago. Third, we infer the allele frequencies of ancestral West Eurasian populations in East Africa and show that this population is a good proxy for the West Eurasian ancestry in South Africa. Thus, we argue the most plausible source of West Eurasian ancestry in Southern Africa is indirect gene flow via East Africa, pretty much reiterating what was said in earlier parts of it. I don't want to be too redundant, so I might skip over certain portions of the article. I'm going to skip that first sentence. And the largest amplitudes obtained with European populations as frequently taken literally, this would seem to implicate Europe as a source of admixture, although Middle Eastern populations are also among the best proxies. The estimated date of gene flow is 43, give or take 2 generations. That'd be 1290, give or take 60 years, assuming 30 years per generation. This was something I was trying to explain to Rob Bourne the other day when we was on that. They keep trying to do their best to not understand that the amount of DNA that's in these people is directly related to ancient admixture, which means a long, long time. The less ancestry they have, the further back in time that admixture took place. And they use 30 years as a general generation for, to the time where they have more kids and procreate. But moving on, before the present, consistent with our previous estimated date, the date is well before the historical arrival of European colonists to the region. So it wasn't through colonialism that this came. So this leaves the Middle East as the best proxy. We next test the robustness of this result. We confirm that this observation is consistent across panels of SNPs with varied ascertainment. We then consider hunter-gatherer populations from other regions of Africa. In particular, we perform the same analysis on the Biaka and the Umbuti of Central Africa. As expected, the inferred source of admixture in these populations is a sub-Saharan African population most closely related to the Yoruba, a Niger-Congo-speaking agriculturalist group from Nigeria. We thus conclude that there is a signal of both allele frequencies and linkage equilibrium that Juan North admixed with a population more closely related to Western Eurasian, i.e. European or Middle Eastern, rather than Eastern Eurasian populations, and that this signal is absent from the hunter-gatherer populations in Central Africa, which is pretty much saying that this is brought in from outside, because if it was already there, the hunter-gatherer populations in Central Africa should have it again as well. Significance is the hunter-gatherer and pastoralist populations of South Africa are among the culturally, linguistically, and genetically most diverse human populations. However, little is known about their history. We show that all of these populations have some ancestry most closely related to Europeans and Middle Easterns, and used this to reconstruct the history of population movement between Eurasia, Eastern Africa, and Southern Africa. And a lot of this seems like a lot of reiteration, but I like to give 2 or 3 witnesses. So I like to pull it from multiple sources to show and confirm the point that I'm making, because a lot of people like to just give you one article and then just run with that one article. But then you may find other articles that came out later that may conflict that. So I like to find some of the more present articles and some of the more earlier articles that came to the same conclusion. And over here to the right, you see a lot of people are part of haplogroup B. We do not descend from them people. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. My ancestors were pastoralists. They were agriculturalists. And we have a tradition of going back to the first agriculturalists, our ancestors in the house of Shem. Moving on. All right. Signal of Western Eurasian relatedness is shared throughout Southern Africa. We next examine whether the signal of relatedness in Western Eurasia is present in other Khoisan populations. For each Khoisan population, we use ALDA to compute weighted LD decay curves using the test population as one reference and either the French or the Yoruba as the other reference. We include you use them as a control. Just if people don't really know, you use it as a control. We include the Central African Umbuti and Biaka populations as negative controls. In all Khoisan populations, the amplitude of the LD decay curve is larger when using French as a reference than when using Yoruba as a reference. In contrast, for the Umbuti and the Biaka, the larger amplitude is seen in using the Yoruba as a reference. And you can see these both in the chart right here. And in figure 2, it says, relationship with Western Eurasia is shared by all Khoisan populations, which is pretty much saying a lot of what we said there. We then fit the exponential decay model. Let me show y'all where I'm at. Decay model to each LD plotted at the inferred amplitudes A and B admixture times of each population. So you can look up here and see exactly what they're talking about in the article. I mean, this is pretty much the reflection of empirical data. I mean, anybody coming against this, they need to source up when they come over here. We ain't trying to have no rhetoric battles. That's why they happy to run over there and hop on the clubhouse now. You can't show no camera, you can't share no work, you can't put no sources in the back chat. You can't do nothing but have pure rhetoric wars, and that's what they love to do. But over here at the source, we like to show and prove what we doing, man. We like to raise the bar on this right here in our community. Same image. A striking observation that emerges from this analysis is that in many of the South African populations, the inferred mixture times depend substantially on the second population used as the reference. Under a model of admixture of a single source population, the decay rate of the LD curve does not depend on the reference population used. This suggests that there are at least 2 separate non-Khoisan sources of ancestry in some of these Khoisan populations. In contrast, for the Central African Umbuti and Biaka, that inferred times do not depend on the reference used. All right, so right over here in this chart, you can see the estimates of Eurasian ancestry in a lot of these groups. And I want to point it out, like the Nama got 14% Western Eurasian ancestry, and that's in South Africa. They're the largest one. I don't think it's really too relevant in a lot of the other groups in South Africa, but when you get to East Africa, it's crazy. Like the Tigray, they're 50%. The Amhara, they're almost 50%. The Afar, they're 46%. The Oromo, they're 41%. Somali, 38%. And the Somali also got like 17% of that Iranian Neolithic or them J markers. The Ethiopian Somali, you got 38%. Like I said, it's pervasive in East Africa. And right here it says a major open question concerns the initial source of the Western Eurasian ancestry in East Africa. The estimated mean time of gene flow in East Africa is about 3,000 years ago, and the amount of gene flow must have been quite extensive, which means they came in wiping people out, wiping the men out and taking the women, because the Western Eurasian ancestral proportions are 40 or 50% in some Ethiopian populations, as is illustrated by the table. Archaeological records from this region are sparse, so Perjani speculated that this admixture was related to the biblical account of the kingdom of Sheba. Now, this is...
I'm sorry, James. You can't gloss over that. A geneticist is. Hold on, brother. A geneticist. This is what for the ignorant people out there. A geneticist is using a biblical account to bring forth parsimony and bring forth explanation, and it shows explanatory power of the biblical account in comparison to the genetic findings here.
Hey, that's no lie, man. A lot of people who don't know for that Iron Age time period and that region of the world, the Bible is considered a historical record. The thing is, the scholars take all of the miracles and all of the other stuff and the prophetic stuff, and they'll sit that to the side and look at the historical document that it is. You know what I'm saying? The history of a people. They look at it for what it is, and a lot of it correlates with the archaeology. We'll find it that shows and proves that this is a historical record. Y'all have to understand, with a lot of these ancient peoples, their mythos is so pervasive in their culture that their God is responsible for everything that happens to them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So they write it from their perspective of what is God doing to us because of this. But they also have a record of saying that they had an interaction, or they have interactions with this God. And from a cultural perspective, I accept what my ancestors say, because a lot of things that sparked me down this route wasn't me necessarily looking for a lot of this stuff. It was a lot me just chilling, and then the idea pops in my head, hey, go look up this, just cuz. And then you start looking up stuff, and all these ideas that was just spontaneously popping in my head to go look up, I'm finding facts after fact after fact after facts about that. And that's why I'd be like, it ain't me. And on that point, I don't think this is me. I think it's something outside of me that is directing me on this path. And that's why I give credence to the following of God. But I don't infuse that into my scholarship like that. What I will infuse, though, into my scholarship is the historical accounts and where our mythos aligns with the historical and the archaeological record. All right, let's move on to the next part here. However, archaeological evidence is not completely absent. So which means that, he gave it as parsimony, but there is archaeological evidence that we can show to push that. Is not completely absent. During this time period, architecture in Ethiopia, culture of Damat, has an unmistakable Southern Arabian appearances in many details. Although there is some debate as to whether these patterns can be attributed to large movements of people versus elite-driven cultural practices, additional linguistic evidence suggests that this time period was when ethno-Semitic languages were introduced to Africa, presumably from Southern Arabia. It is perhaps not a coincidence that the highest levels of Western Eurasian ancestry in East Africa are found in the Amhara and the Tigray, who speak ethno-Semitic languages and live in what is previously the territory of Damat and was later the kingdom of Aksum. So I think, man, like I said, the evidence is overwhelming. And for him to use a biblical account, and we did not only find archaeological, but also linguistical evidence to help and support this migration pattern, like the brother said, shows that there is explanatory power from the biblical narrative that can enlighten us on a lot of migration patterns that have taken place across the world. Because like I said, after the last glacial maximum, these migration patterns to different regions is fitting almost to a T the Genesis 10 table of nations. And that means that our ancestors knew what they were talking about when they wrote it down, and that this oral tradition is, if you want to look at it on a secular level, tens of thousands of years old. that has been kept through one generation of people and then finally canonized into what we call the Bible today. And that's powerful, man. For your oral tradition to go back tens of thousands of years. And this right here is from Genomic Insights into the Origin of Farming in the Ancient Near East, published in Nature, volume 536 on pages 419 through 424, published July 25th of 2016. And it was by Yosef Lazardis, senior staff scientist at Reich Lab, David Reich Lab. And if you know David Reich, he is pretty much the person who discovered these methods that they use in today. Ancient DNA, Biology, and Disease, Harvard Medical School, David Reich, Harvard Medical School, Department of Genetics. All right, here we go. There's an image of it right there to the right. So if you're looking it up, you'll know exactly what you're looking for. The impact of the Near East farmers extend beyond the Near East. Farmers related to the Anatolia spread westward into Europe. Farmers related to those in the Levant spread southward into East Africa. Farmers related to those of Iran spread northward into the Eurasian steppe. And people related both to the early farmers of Iran and to pastoralists of the Eurasian steppe spread eastward into South Asia. Among the first farmers, those of the Levantine traced 2/3 of their ancestry to people related to the Natufian hunter-gatherers and 1/3 to people related to Anatolian farmers. Western Iranian first farmer clusters with a likely Mesolithic Hutu 11B individual are more remotely related with hunter-gatherers from southern Caucasus and share alleles at the equal rate with Anatolian and Levantine early farmers, highlighting the long-term isolation of Western Iran. During subsequent millennia, the early farming populations of the Near East expanded in all directions and mixed, as we can only model populations of the Chalcolithic and the subsequent Bronze Age as having ancestry from 2 or more sources. The Chalcolithic people of Western Iran can be modeled as a mixture of Neolithic people of Western Iran, the Levant, and the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, subsequent with their position in the principal component analysis, which again goes to what I was saying, that J marker is closely related to these Caucasian hunters and gatherers, and y'all gonna have to explain that when y'all keep trying to make it a Shemitic lineage. Admixture from population related to the Chalcolithic people of Western Iran had a wide impact, consistent with contributing 44% of their ancestry, contributing 44% of the ancestry of Levantine Bronze Age populations in the South, and 33% of ancestry of Chalcolithic Northwest Anatolians in the West, which means that these people migrated from that region down into Levant, which explains why people from the Levant came into East Africa and they're carrying this Western Iranian hunter-gatherer lineage. Admixture from population related to Chalcolithic people of Iran did that part. 33% in West. Our analysis showed that the ancient populations of the Chalcolithic Iran and Chalcolithic Armenia, Bronze Age Armenia, and Chalcolithic Anatolia were all composed of the same ancestral components, albeit slightly different proportions. Our data document continuity across the hunter-gatherer/farming transition, separately in the southern Levant and in the southern Caucasus Iran highlands. The qualitative evidence for this principal component analysis, admixture, and outgroup F3 analysis cluster Levantine hunter-gatherers, Natufians, with Levantine farmers, and Iranian and Caucasian hunter-gatherers with Iranian farmers, as can be seen in these figures. I think I have some of them in here. If not, I can go to the article and show them towards the end. We confirmed this in the Levant by showing that its early farmers shared significantly more alleles with Natufians than with the early farmers of Iran, which means they have more admixture there. The early farmers of the Caucasus Iran highlands similarly share significantly more alleles with the hunter-gatherers of this region than with the early farmers of the Levant. Is significantly, which is showing it. And here, right here, are the two images. I wish I could blow this up a little bit more, but what the images are pretty much showing in these African geographical locations with highlights in the back is pretty much just showing where a lot of these people were and where they're from. And I really want to focus on the one more to the right, because as you can see, this is right here, it's really showing like the purple right here is the Western hunter-gatherers of Europe. The blue is the Eastern hunter-gatherers, and anyone who's seen my Japhetic lineage presentation would know exactly what I'm talking about. And as you can see, that Iranian Neolithic is found right there with that northeast Western Eurasian intersection spear that they're calling right here with this arrow right here, which is showing the genetic links between these two populations. So people can't get around that J marker going back to these Western Eurasian, not Western Eurasian, these European hunter-gatherers. To further assess the robustness of our inferences, we develop a method of inferring the existence and genetic affinities of ancient populations from unobserved ghost populations. This method takes advantage of the insight that if an unsampled ghost population admixes with differentiated substratum populations, it is possible to extrapolate its identity by intersecting clines of populations with variable proportions of ghost and substratum ancestry. Applying this while withholding major populations we validated some of our key inferences, successfully inferring mixture proportions consistent with those obtained when the populations are included in the analysis. Application of this method highlights the impact of ancient North Eurasians. That was a big part of what I presented in my peoples of the hunters and gatherers of ancient Europe, because a lot of them descend directly from the ancient North Eurasian ancestry, related to 2200 22,000 BTE Malta boy, Malta 1, and 15,000 BTE Alphonta Gora 2 on populations living in Europe, the Americas, and in Eastern Eurasia. Eastern Eurasians can be modeled as having arrayed along a cline in different population proportions of ancient North Eurasian ancestry, ranging from 40% of it in Native Americans, matching previous findings, to no less than 5 to 10% in East Asian groups, including the Han Chinese. So yes, the Han Chinese descend from Jaffa. And I just added this part because I thought it highlighted some areas that was significant to Jaffa, the presentation I did earlier. And I just wanted to highlight it to just show, especially to emphasize that the J marker is related to these groups. We also document a cline of ancient North Eurasian ancestry across the east-west extent of Eurasia. East hunter-gatherers derive 3/4 of their ancestry from the ancient North Eurasian. Scandinavian hunter-gatherers are a mix of East hunter-gatherers and West hunter-gatherers. And the West hunter-gatherers are a mix of East hunter-gatherers and Upper Paleolithic Beacon from Switzerland. These are a lot of the people that carried the alleles for the brighter skin. They were up towards Switzerland, and they came together with the alleles that were brought from the E1B1B populations coming out of the Near East to make the modern European we see today as he looks. Northwest Anatolians with ancestry from a population related to European hunter-gatherers are better modeled if this ancestry is taken as more extreme than Beacon. And I already told you why I added that part in there, because I do want to emphasize that this J marker is more related to the European hunter-gatherers than it is to any of the indigenous people to the Near East, which in my next presentation I will be showing and proving that they descend from macro haplogroup DE. To further assess the robustness of our inferences, we develop a method. Oh yeah, I already read that part right there. I'll just add it again. Okay, moving on over here to this side over here. Application of this method highlights the impact of ancient North Eurasian. Oh shoot, I did.
Making plays. Woo! Long road. Heavy. Every day your hood gives, that's a victory. Shed a few tears for this victory. Yeah. Hey. I wanna see the Father, that's what I'm in it for. Pure heart, narrow path, 10 toes. Can't be in it for yourself, that ain't how it goes. Get this message to his people, that'll make them go. Go, go, go. Your who will make me go. Go, go, go. That's what I'm in it for. Go, go. Kingdom gotta glow. Go, go. We can't miss the show. Kingdom thinking, yeah, it boxed me in. Threw a seed in the ground and we boxed it in. Put the law on my line, trying to reel them in. Yeah, my people at the bottom, wildin' in they sin. Gotta pull them up, they're a prize though. Tell them that they special, eyes wide open. Lost a lot when they crossed the waters on the boats. Yahoo shot the realest brother, he get all the votes. Our lives, high value, price check. Yahuwah strapped us in, life vest. Preparation for the feast, we gon' make a toast. Branded us in barrel sheets, send us to our coast. I wanna see the Father, that's what I'm in it for. Pure heart, narrow path, 10 toes. Can't be in it for yourself, that ain't how it goes. Get this message to his people, that'll make them go. Go, go, go. Yahuwah make me go. Go, go, go. That's what I'm in it for. Go, go, go. Kingdom gotta glow. Go, go, we can't miss the show.
Victory, open the scriptures, read. Open your eyes and see. Torah the prophecy, we from the chosen seed. You who get all the glory, we just a piece of the story. Torah's mandatory, gotta keep moving forward. Pray to fear the void. I can't stress enough, gotta stop messing up. Gotta start tightening up. Stay on the narrow path, the light will brighten up. Gotta give him praise, even on bad days. It's gonna be better days. Desperate need of a change, you gotta change your ways. Ay. 10 toes down, I stand. I'm embedded to this truth, I get my right hand. Lay my life down, they don't understand. Keep seeking the Father to the very end.
I wanna see the Father, that's what I'm in it for. Pure heart, narrow path, 10 toes. Can't be in it for yourself, that ain't how it goes. Get this message to his people, that'll make them go. Go, go, go. Yahuwah make me go. Go, go, go. That's what I'm in it for. Go, go, go. Kingdom gotta glow. Go, go, we can't miss the show. I wanna see the Father, that's what I'm in it for. Pure heart, narrow path, 10 toes. Can't be in it for yourself, that ain't how it goes. Get this message to his people, that'll make them